Hi, I'm Blue Sue, and I like Digital Circus. So, Digital Circus, huh? I really liked this show, but considering how long it took for the second episode to come out, I think it's gonna be a while until we get new content. I mean, don't get me wrong, 6 months is absurdly fast for an indie production of this quality. But for me, that's 6 months! I just turned 17 and now I'm graduating? What the fuck? So, whilst I was waiting for more Digital Circus, and slowly but surely letting it rot my brain during exams, I started to question, what is Digital Circus actually about? Like, on a thematic level, what is it about? What is it trying to say as a work of art? Because despite what the content farms and bootleg merch would have you believe, this is supposed to be a work of art with something to say. So I'm gonna try and overanalyze Digital Circus. I'll be breaking down the first 2 episodes individually and trying to see if I can extrapolate some sort of theme for each one. I'll specifically be analyzing Pomni's character arc in each episode, since as the protagonist, anything she learns is likely to be connected to whatever message the Digital Circus is going for. Once I've gotten 2 themes from the 2 episodes, I'll be comparing them and hopefully extrapolate some sort of overarching theme that we can point to in order to wildly jump to outrageous conclusions on what's going to happen next. So, how are we gonna break this down? I'm so glad you asked. This is a plot pyramid. Now, if you're a nerd on the internet, you probably already know what this is. But for the people who didn't pay attention in English class, let me explain. The plot pyramid is a way to break down a narrative into 6 basic elements. First is the exposition, where the audience is introduced to the world. Then is the inciting incident, which in some way or another kicks the plot into motion by establishing some sort of problem. Rising action is when the problem gets more complicated and the stakes are raised. The climax is when the problem stakes reach its peak, and the falling action and resolution is the aftermath of the climax and the resolution to the problem. Whilst this is usually used to analyze the plots of narratives, I'm going to be using this structure to break down Pomni's character arcs in both episodes specifically. Since a character arc is intrinsically tied to the events of a story, there isn't going to be much difference between using this structure to analyze a plot or a character arc. Although, being real, we can just ignore the exhibition part of the plot pyramid for this. But Sue, why the plot pyramid? Why not use some other plot structure, like the 3-act structure or the hero's journey? That's because the plot pyramid is more simple. You see this shit? What am I even looking at? So yeah, in order to simplify things, we're using the plot pyramid. Obviously, the plot pyramid isn't a catch-all for every single story known to man, but for this video, it'll do the job. So with all that being said, let's analyze episode 1. Alright, episode 1. For the 3 people who've never seen this show, what the hell are you doing here? I'm about to spoil the whole thing! Watch it! Watch it now! Episode 1's main purpose is basically to establish the show's premise, characters, and tone. But does it establish? Well, this is Pomni. She's our protagonist, and she's stuck in a digital world called the Digital Circus, which isn't actually a circus, but just a gigantic playroom, but shut up! The Digital Circus is run by an AI called Kane, a pair of dentures in a suit whose main purpose is to keep all the other humans trapped in the circus sane and happy with wacky adventures in order to keep them from being abstracted. What is abstraction? We don't really know. It seems to be an allegory for something, but all we can say for now is that it's basically this world's closest thing to death. You don't want this. But we're not here to summarize the plot of episode 1, we're here to break it down. So how does Pomni's character arc in episode 1 fit into the plot pyramid? And how can we extrapolate a theme from what she learns? Let's start with the inciting incident. Plot-wise, the inciting incident is right at the beginning of the episode where Pomni teleports into the Digital Circus. But character-wise, the inciting incident starts here.
Oh, okay, now I get it! This is a dream, and I should just play along until I wake up, right?
This is where Pomni's problem is established. The problem for her character arc is that she's in denial. She doesn't want to believe that she's permanently stuck in the Digital Circus, so she's denying it by saying it's all a dream. This is the flaw that's going to be challenged and perhaps overcome by the end of the episode. So, problem is established. How does this problem get more complicated? Well, the problem reaches its rising action with Kaufmo's abstraction. Whoa, one of the circus members has abstracted. Now things are getting a bit more real, and Pomni's denial is being challenged. Ragatha, the person who's been the nicest to Pomni so far, gets absolutely destroyed by Kaufmo. And now she's glitching, and you can see it on Pomni's face. You could tell that she understands the stakes here. If Pomni truly believed that everything and everyone in the digital world was just a dream, then she wouldn't care about Ragatha and wouldn't attempt to reach out and save her, since Ragatha wouldn't be real. She'd just be another part of the dream. And we see this acknowledgement of reality again in this moment here. After failing to save Ragatha and running away from the abstracted Kaufmo, Pomni has a moment where she thinks about running away or going back to help Ragatha, and she chooses to go back. Again, if she thought that this was a dream, then she wouldn't bother. On some level, Pomni understands that this is reality, and after Kaufmo's abstraction, she's beginning to accept it a little more. So, Ragatha gives Pomni a mission. In order to clean up the mess that Kaufmo has caused and stop Ragatha from glitching, Pomni needs to go out and find Kane. And at first, she does try, even at the risk of potentially getting caught by the abstracted Kaufmo. But then she sees this.
God, where is Kane?
So, we've reached the climax. How do I know this? Because this is the point where the stakes for Pomni's arc are the highest. Throughout the whole episode, Pomni has been concerned by a potential exit door, one that she could use to potentially leave the digital circus. And here it is, in all its glory. And it's here that Pomni is given a choice. She could stay in the digital circus, admit that this is her new reality, and help Ragatha, who she would by this point admit is not part of her dream and is instead a real person. Or she could go through the exit door and therefore give in to her denial, as abandoning Ragatha for the exit would require Pomni to believe that Ragatha was just another part of her dream and wouldn't need any help. And yeah, she chooses the exit. Great job, Pomni! Now you have no character growth. So Pomni doubles down on her denial, abandoning what little growth she had in this episode, and she's immediately punished for it. It's just office room after office room, exit door after exit door, repeating hallway after repeating hallway. And throughout this whole experience, Pomni's denial is getting harder and harder to hold on to. Each door puts another dent in her denial, but she keeps going at it in the frivolous hope that at least one of these doors will give her her exit. That is, right up until... And it's here that Pomni's denial is completely shattered. There's no denying it now. There is nothing behind the exit doors. There is no escape. Pomni is trapped here. The evidence for it is all around her, and she's helpless in the face of it. Anyway, back to wacky Kane shenanigans. The following action of this episode is basically just Kane cleaning up everyone's mess, including bringing Pomni back from the void, putting Kaufmo in a hole, and deglitchifying Ragatha. And whoa, looks like Pomni's decision to double down on her denial back there has potential long-lasting consequences on her relationship with Ragatha. Whoops. And it's here that we get our resolution. Because of Pomni's experience in the void, there's no way for her to deny her new reality anymore. And with a crooked and forced smile, she finally accepts her new home. Alright, that's a wrap on episode 1. So, what have we learned here? Well, looking at Pomni's character arc with the context of the plot pyramid gives us a very clear theme, which is denial versus reality. We have the problem for the episode, where Pomni denies reality and says that everything is a dream. We get the rising action, where Pomni's denial is challenged and she has a bit of growth by going back to help Ragatha. We have the climax, where Pomni goes back on her growth and embraces denial before having it thrown back into her face. And then we have the falling action and resolution, where Pomni experiences the consequences for her denial and finally accepts reality. Essentially, Pomni has an existential crisis. By accepting reality, she's essentially accepting her own helplessness and lack of control over this situation. The reality in the theme of denial versus reality is the fact that Pomni is trapped in the digital circus and has no power over whether or not she can leave. We'll explore the implications of this theme later, but for now let's keep this theme in mind as we move on to episode 2. Okay, episode 2. Whilst episode 1 is more concerned with introducing the world and characters to the audience, episode 2 is more likely to be an indicator of what we're going to see from the show in the future. So the themes it'll present here are more likely to point us in the direction of an overarching theme. So let's break out our old friend, the plot pyramid again. The inciting incident for this episode character-wise is Pomni's nightmare. By this point, Pomni has accepted that there is no way out of the digital circus, but has very clearly not come to terms with it. Obviously, anyone would be afraid of abstraction, but what seems to be highlighted here is Pomni's fear of being alone. The center of Pomni's nightmare is not necessarily being abstracted, but that no one cares about her, and that she would be immediately forgotten if she did abstract. Basically, she's afraid that she doesn't matter. So, problem for the episode's established. How does the problem get more complicated during the rising action? Well, this one's a bit more interesting. With rising action, the problem tends to get more complicated in some way. So in an episode that's about Pomni's fear that she doesn't matter, something, or someone, would have to make this problem more complicated in some way. Ragatha's a bit of a neutral force in this regard, since while she's trying to cheer Pomni up, her efforts are largely ineffective. Instead, Pomni's fear of not mattering is complicated by having said fear be reinforced during the extended Mad Max Fury reference that is this chase sequence. Pomni is having what little trust she has for the circus gang tested as she's thrown around repeatedly and having her digital life endangered by them. And who else is doing the life endangering than the lovable asshole himself, Jax? So let's talk about Jax for a second. He's been a bit of a controversial figure lately since people have been saying that he's a lot more cruel and asshole-ish than the previous episode. And whilst I don't really think he's acting any more of an asshole than he did in the pilot, there is an argument to be made that he generally causes more chaos and direct conflict in this episode than the last one. And I think there could be a reason for this, because it's my theory that Jax is basically the antagonist of this episode. And I don't mean this in a he drives the conflict of the plot way, although he very much does that. No, I mean more so that he's the ideological antagonist of this episode. One of the ways in which protagonist and antagonist can be categorized is by saying that the protagonist asks a question that the antagonist answers in some way. The protagonist's question is what gets explored throughout the text, and the antagonist's answer is usually what the writer believes is the quote-unquote wrong answer to the question. And this is basically what's going on in episode 2. Pomni's question is about whether or not people care about her and if her life matters in this digital world. And Jax's answer is a wholehearted no. And he gives this answer by deliberately putting Pomni in danger during the car chase and being completely indifferent to the lives of the NPCs, which we'll get to that part. But yeah, I think that Jax is the antagonist here. And we'll explore more of Jax and what this means for the show later. But enough overanalyzing. Let's get back to the rest of the episode. So, candy shenanigans ensue, the game gets glitched, Pomni and an NPC called Gummy Goo fall into the backrooms, and whoopsie-daisy, Kane accidentally programmed sentience into this NPC, and now he's having an existential crisis. Now, some people might be tempted to connect this existential crisis to this existential crisis, but I wouldn't be so quick to do so. Pomni's existential crisis here is more about accepting her powerlessness in a situation where she has no control, and finally putting aside her denial. But Gummy Goo never has an issue with powerlessness or denial. Instead, this existential crisis is more about not mattering. After realizing his life is meant to be nothing but an obstacle to the quote-unquote real people that are Pomni and the circus gang, Gummy Goo is doubting how much he and his own life matters, and oh, would you look at that? So yeah, Gummy Goo is Pomni's foil in this episode. He's yet another person who's worrying about how much his life actually matters in the grand scheme of things. There's a lot of dialogue about whether or not Gummy Goo is a real person or not, but this isn't the main point of the episode. The real theme here is about whether his and Pomni's lives matter or not. So let's skip over the candy shenanigans and get right to the meat of this episode, which is this discussion right here. That's right, this is the climax of the episode.
This is a lot more anticlimactic than I was hoping it'd be.
Shut up, Jax. Your purpose in this episode is to be explicitly wrong. But yeah, the climax of this episode is based on the stakes of whether or not Pomni can convince Gummy Goo that his, and by extension her, life matters. And when we look at the dialogue of this conversation, Pomni isn't trying to convince Gummy Goo that his life is real. Instead, she's focused on the people that care about Gummy Goo to prove that his life matters.
You still care about your buddies up there, don't you? I'm sure they still care about you.
And when that doesn't work, Pomni offers Gummy Goo a place in the circus. At first, I was a bit weirded out by the decision to make Pomni's offer of the circus be what convinces Gummy Goo to leave the backrooms with her, since I was a bit caught up on the being real language and thought that Pomni was offering Gummy Goo the chance to be real, which would be kinda screwed up since Gummy Goo and his friends were real regardless of being at the circus or not. But I was an idiot, and that's not what this scene is about. Instead, Pomni's offer of the circus to Gummy Goo is less about the content of the offer and more about the offer itself. Pomni's offer of bringing Gummy Goo to the circus is less about bringing him there and more about offering him an act of kindness. She reaches out to him in spite of him thinking that he doesn't matter, and by doing this, proves that even if he doesn't matter to the game, he matters to her. So, with Pomni's new friend in tow, the two characters try to glitch their way out of the backrooms, and...
I just realized this might be a little violent.
This is my favorite scene in the episode. And whilst the animation and music are both great, what I really want to focus on is the cinematography. The episode starts with Pomni falling down a hole, representing her fear of not mattering and being abandoned once she's abstracted. But in this scene, she, as well as Gummigu, are able to rise out of the pit. And I have no idea if this was intentional, but in any case, it signals that she's overcome her fear of not mattering by finding a friend, and that she's now a little bit less alone. Anyway, Gummigu dies. So yeah, Gummigu is killed by Kane in a horrific but kinda comedic way. And it's the slight comedy of Gummigu's death that rubs the salt in the wound even more, because this isn't just a funny death scene. By immediately getting rid of Gummigu, Kane is basically inadvertently telling Pomni that no, his life didn't matter, and by extension her life doesn't matter. And the fact that Gummigu doesn't even get a dignified death rubs this in Pomni's face even more. And Pomni's pained laugh here, reminiscent of her expression at the end of episode 1, shows that she's regressed all the way back to the beginning of the episode. Her growth is completely undone, and she's been given the answer to her question. Her life doesn't matter in the slightest. But there's still a little bit of episode left, and we still haven't reached the resolution.
Got everything ready. Hey, you at least want to join us for Kaufmo's funeral? We like to have a little funeral service to remember the people who abstract. This one just got pushed around a bit with your arrival and everything.
It's the least we can do to honor their memory.
So, I've been largely ignoring Ragatha, and that's because I could honestly make a whole other video about her arc in this episode. But here, Ragatha and the rest of the circus crew, minus Jax, prove to Pomni that her life matters by showing how much they cared about Kaufmo. And it's pretty explicit. They even go back to the nightmare sequence and show Pomni being lifted out of the pit. With Kaufmo's funeral, they show they can still believe in the significance of their lives. And so in spite of Gummigu's death, Pomni's growth is salvaged, at least a little bit. So that's episode 2, and the theme here is just as, if not even more clear than episode 1's. After accepting the reality of her situation in episode 1, she fears that her life does not matter, and the rest of the circus gang won't care if she abstracts. And over the course of the episode, and with great difficulty, she eventually comes to the conclusion that your life doesn't have to matter in the grand scheme of things in order to matter to the people around you. But who cares about any of that crap? We finished analyzing both episodes, and now it's time to speculate. So, after breaking down our 2 digital circus episodes, we now have 2 themes, accepting the reality of a situation outside of our control and whether or not our lives matter. And it's not hard to see how these 2 themes overlap. Whilst the 2 themes are very different, they're both very much about existentialism and exploring human existence in a chaotic and potentially indifferent world. It is my belief that the Amazing Digital Circus's overarching theme will be about existentialism, and that each episode will be a different line of inquiry into this theme. Hey Sue! Yeah? You big, fat, stupid idiot. I already knew the digital circus was about existentialism. This isn't overanalysis. This isn't wild speculation. You just wasted all
approximately 19 minutes
of our time. Oh, you want to get into overanalysis? You want to get into wild speculation? Alright, you asked for this. Let's get back to Jax. So, Jax. I already spoke about how I thought Jax was the ideological antagonist of episode 2, but let's analyze that role in the context of our now established overarching theme of existentialism. If Jax is the one who tells Pomni that her life doesn't matter, then what does that mean for his thoughts on existentialism? Right. My theory is that Jax is a nihilist. Throughout episode 2, Jax doesn't seem to care at all for any of the NPCs or members of the digital circus. First off, he shows no care for the NPCs by a willingness to be incredibly brutal and violent towards the Gummy Crocs, a trait that no one else in the Circus gang shares. He also continues to show no care for the NPCs by letting the Fudge commit genocide on hundreds of Candy citizens. This lack of care for the NPCs is in direct contrast to Pomni and her kindness towards Gummy Goo. He also shows no care for any of the Circus members by being willing to put them in harm's way just for his own personal enjoyment. This is a trait shown in both episode 1 and episode 2, and do I really need to show examples for this one? Just watch the episodes. It's literally his entire personality. This lack of care for literally anything could easily be a result of his nihilistic perspective and would be the natural way to take his character if the overarching theme of the show is truly about existentialism. And if this show is advocating that the lives of the NPCs and the characters of the circus matter, then Jax would be the natural choice for the antagonist as the one who believes that they don't matter. This could open the door to some kind of redemption arc where he learns the value of a life, or he could double down on this mentality and become a straight up villain. And with what Gooseworx has said about this guy, I'm kinda leaning towards the latter. Don't get me wrong, I don't think Jax will be entirely irredeemable. This moment here shows that he has at least some level of care for the people in the circus, which means that his nihilistic mindset isn't working out the best for him. And it's still possible that he could be redeemed at some point in the story, since the way that Gooseworx speaks about him gives me less straight up villain vibes and more this guy is a pathetic piece of shit that deserves to suffer vibes. But that's just my personal interpretation. This could go either way. Who knows? Maybe Gooseworx wants to see me suffer. As for what villainous acts Jax might do down the line, if we're going with the interpretation that Jax is a nihilist, then he would have to do something in line with that nihilistic mindset. So let's go to the extremes. Hey, we're already over-speculating anyway. Now, this isn't Evangelion, so I think the next worst thing that Jax could possibly do is murder. Yay. Now, he could potentially murder one of the circus members, but I think it's more likely that Jax is gonna off one of the NPCs, Infinity Train style. If you know, you know. But this would be in line with his nihilistic mindset. If he believes that the lives of the NPCs don't matter, as he's demonstrated so eloquently in episode 2, then this could potentially be one of his terrible actions that Gooseworx has alluded to. It could be his way of doubling down on his belief that nothing matters, not even murdering the life of a being he sees as non-sentient. But that's enough of Jax. He gets enough attention already. Lord knows he gets enough attention already. Let's talk about the Teeth Man. What is a god? For many, gods are beings with incredible power, incomprehensible beings beyond the understanding of mere mortals, with omnipotent knowledge about the universe. The ancient Greeks used gods to explain things that they couldn't understand, like the sun, or wine, I guess. And whether you do or don't believe in some sort of higher power, one thing's for sure. Gods are, in a sense, personifications of things that are out of our control and beyond our understanding. Personifications of life and its chaotic, unpredictable ways. Okay, is Cain God? What the hell is up with all this religious imagery? Why is his name Cain? Is that a reference to Cain and Abel? Did he kill his brother? Did he have a brother? Why did the NPC see him as a god? Was this a one-off joke that you just thought was funny? Does any of this have any significance at all? Am I going insane? Okay, let's calm down a bit. Now, I'm gonna go out here and say that Cain probably isn't a literal stand-in for God. This entire video has been me overanalyzing this show with only 2 episodes, and even I think that's a bit far. No, instead I'm going to present the theory that Cain has a role that's equivalent to a god in the context of the theme of existentialism. What I mean is that if Digital Circus's main theme really is existentialism, then Cain could possibly represent the chaotic and unpredictable forces of the universe that all the members of the circus are helpless in the face of. What the fuck? Let me explain! First off, we established that one of the themes of episode 1 is Pomni's helplessness whilst being trapped in the Digital Circus. If existentialism is really the main theme of Digital Circus, then part of it would be exploring how to deal with that helplessness to a chaotic and indifferent universe. And Cain already fills the role of an all-powerful and chaotic force. He's just this bundle of unpredictability and immense power that Pomni, as well as the rest of the gang, just kinda has to put up with. And he is definitely all-powerful in this world. He has all-seeing eyes, he can teleport basically anywhere, he says that the only thing he can't control are the circus gang's minds, and he literally creates life on a daily basis. And the ways in which he uses that power are unpredictable, out of anyone's control, and can potentially cause grief and suffering. And yeah, let's talk about Gummy Goo. I've been thinking about what the narrative purpose of Gummy Goo's death is, and according to Gooseworx, it was just for the lols, which is painful. But screw authorial intent. I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say that Gummy Goo's death by Cain's hand is a little more significant than that. In fact, I'm gonna make the argument that Gummy Goo's death is an elaboration on the themes of episode 1 and existential helplessness. If Cain really is the god of this world and represents the uncontrollable and chaotic forces of the universe, which is one hell of a statement, then Gummigu's death, in the context of the real world, represents how, despite any emotional catharsis we might get about how much we matter in the universe is still indifferent. No matter how much we believe in the significance of our lives, we are still prone to the chaos of the universe. And at the end of the day, we are all but helpless pawns in the face of existential threats outside of our control. Or maybe it was all just for the lols. Yeah, that's probably it. Now, in terms of what this interpretation means for Cain's potential character growth, I'm honestly not sure. I don't think that Cain is some antagonist to be defeated, although he certainly acts like an antagonist. How could you? If we're going off of the themes of episode 2, and about how connecting with other people is important in the face of existential dread, it's possible that Pomni, or any of the other Circus characters, might connect with Cain in some way to develop him as a character. Because, let's be honest, whilst he's not a villain, his indifference towards murdering the NPCs and his lack of understanding of the characters is a problem. Since Cain is very much a character with his own individual personality, I definitely don't think he's a one-to-one allegory for the chaotic forces of the universe. Therefore, I think that if Pomni, or any of the other characters, connect with him in some way, it could effectively represent how people can connect with others to overcome the chaos of life without making it so that Pomni is literally defeating God. But Sue, do you really believe all this stuff? Do you really think that Cain is the equivalent to a god and that Jax is a nihilist? Is this show really gonna be about existentialism? The show literally only has 2 episodes. How can you say that you know what Digital Circus is actually about? Well, those are all some really good questions, and I think they deserve answering. Let's talk about analyzing art. So, this is kind of a weird video to make, right? I mean, the show only has 2 episodes out as of now. What's the point of trying to do a narrative analysis on a thing that doesn't even have the majority of its content out? Well, I had a couple reasons behind wanting to make this video. First off, if it wasn't obvious enough already, I really like this show. It's one of my favorite shows coming out right now, and I'm legitimately amazed by all the incredibly talented animators, storyboarders, musicians, voice actors, just everyone working on this show, especially since this is an indie production. This video is partly just an excuse to talk about this show more as we wait for the next episode. But that's not all. Another one of the things I love is narrative analysis. I love breaking down stories and trying to interpret a work of art I love in different ways. And I feel like the intentions behind analyzing art can be commonly misconstrued. English students and teachers are memed a lot for overanalyzing stuff, and whilst I'm not necessarily against that, I want to reframe people's perspectives on art analysis. Because in my eyes, analyzing art is not just about finding the intent of the creator. It's part of it, but it's not everything. If it was, then we just ask the creator what their intentions were, and their word would be God. Instead, my intention when it comes to analyzing Digital Circus, and really any kind of art, is to find meaning in things that might not even necessarily be intentional, and try to back up my claim. I honestly doubt that Gummigu's death was supposed to be about how, even if we reach some sort of emotional catharsis about our human existence, we are still subject to the chaotic forces of the universe. I mean, Gooseworx literally said it was for the lulz. I love the show, but it's not Disco Elysium or anything. But I like interpreting it in this way because, 1, it falls in line with what I believe the show is about, and 2, it's a fun interpretation that makes me appreciate the show even more than I already do. And isn't art less about what people put into it, and more what people get out of it? And listen, I don't know if Jax is a nihilist or if he's gonna kill an NPC, and I honestly doubt that Cain is supposed to be some sort of allegory for the chaos of the universe. I would be legitimately shocked if that turned out to be right. But at the very least, I hope my wacky conspiracy theories helped you appreciate the show I love at least a little bit more than you already have. And if literally everything in this video is debunked with episode 3, then that's okay. It just means more for me to analyze next time, and I'll never complain about that. And if there's anything you should take away from this video, it's what the fuck is up with the blue teapots? They're here when Pomni and Gummigu escape the backrooms. They're in the first episode. There's one in this promo image. What is up with these teapots? Are you foreshadowing something? Do they symbolize something? Do they have any narrative significance at all? Did you just put a random object in the scene because you thought it looked pretty? I need answers!
Come on!